December 21st, 2025. Guys, just a quick update on something that could be quite concerning for the U.S. and everyone involved. But about a week ago or so, the U.S. seized the Clipper. It was a oil transport ship from Venezuela, and it was what they call dark transports or something like that. In other words, they turn off all the navigational GPS systems and stuff like that to where they can't be tracked. And so they got the Clipper. When they did, or the skipper, excuse me, when they did, Carolyn Levitt came on and announced that it would be coming to a U.S. port and offloaded. And it's got to do with sanctions and things like that. Anyway, and I've got, we're going to flip over to a live map. We'll show you where the skipper is, and it's about to pull into the area offshore of Galveston to where it can down or offload to smaller boats, and then they can go up into the harbor to the refineries, transports, things like that. But we don't know where the one that they got yesterday is going. We don't know that yet. And when they got this one, they didn't say what port, but it, from Venezuela just coming up through the Caribbean, it would make the most sense. And that's what it's getting ready probably today to park and be offloaded. Now, with the other one coming in, it's like the first time you get away with something, you caught the person off guard. Like when we got the ship because of the sanctions, the fentanyl boats and all of that. I don't know all the details, and I'm not sure where this ship was originally supposed to be going with the oil before our U.S. Coast Guard boarded it and seized it. Well, you got a ship this big, full of oil that will burn, and how hard would it be to put an explosion or explosive on that ship, or multiple ones, or hit it with a drone or something like that from the air? But to me, it looks like we may get away with this skipper vehicle that you're seeing in this picture here. But very quickly, the cartels and the people like that, the Gulf cartels, drug cartels, they are not stupid. They may be evil, but they're not stupid. And so if they see that this is going to be a continuous thing, they could take out the entire Houston, Galveston area. And it would crush the U.S. oil prices as far as it would crush the industry and expand the prices. Let me straighten that out. And create quite a shortage. And it would cause tremendous amount of pollution in the Gulf of America, and depending on what all happened, because if it was parked in an area where a lot of boats are, and that's where it's headed as we speak, then it would be kind of a domino effect of explosion. Do you understand what I'm saying? But let's read this a minute, and we're going to go to the live map. It says, President Trump's gunboat diplomacy against Venezuela's autocratic leader, Nicolas Maduro, has moved full steam ahead. U.S. forces have seized 2 sanctioned dark fleet oil tankers, with the latest interception carried out during an early Saturday morning operation. That was yesterday, by the U.S. Coast Guard off the coast of Venezuela. And you can see the map here. It comes right up, and they brought it right just south of Cuba and right up into the Gulf of America. So the first seizure occurred earlier this month involving the VLCC skipper and sent shockwaves through the Caribbean region. At the time, White House Press Secretary Levitt said skipper was en route to a U.S. port and the U.S. intended to seize the oil. However, with the second tanker now seized and its name yet to be released, skipper had faded from the news cycle until now. That's because it's being picked up on the new maps, and it's about to be put into position where it would be a very critical area. But we may have got away with something with this one. Now, again, that would change pretty quick if this became a routine for the U.S., like I said. But what if they suspected on this skipper, the one that's pulling into the Houston offload area now? They call it the layering area. Anyway, if they suspected this would happen, they could have already planted something. And again, it goes back to the Trojan horse. And this would be much larger than any Trojan horse that we talk about in history. But again, the second tanker, they haven't named it. We don't know how we would look for it. But let's take a look at where it's at right now live. Now, this is a wide map. You got Venezuela right here in the bottom, guys. Bottom right. Right there. It's not a not a long way to get drugs over into Haiti, Dominican Republic, Cuba, anywhere like this, and get it passed through any way you wanted to. Really, Caribbean cruises, flights, it can all be done with the right people in place, and that's how it works. But there's a lot of ships in here, and this really isn't showing a full extent of it. But the traffic is very heavy off the Galveston area. And this is the first ship, the Skipper, right here. It's a big oil tanker confiscated just down here off the coast of Venezuela, right there. There's Caracas. Anyway, let's look at the movement on this thing. And this was yesterday, and you just take your slide at the bottom. Let me pull it back down and move it forward. And it's going to show you that sometimes today on the 21st, it's going to be right there, and that is in that, what they call the lightering area. And I think they've used actually underwater pipelines, but I think on most of this area, it's just a series of a bunch of smaller ships, but it's very crowded. It's like a big parking lot in there that are download, or the big ships offload, pump out into the smaller ships, and then they go into Galveston Bay, into the refinery areas there. But it would be the perfect Trojan horse scenario. Now, a friend of the channel, most of you know who they are, I'm not going to mention any names, mentioned that someone else that you guys probably have heard of has spoken about information, and this happened Thursday, I think it was, about within the next 5 days, something major happening in the Gulf of America. You know, and a plane was mentioned, things like that. A lot of you may have heard that. Again, I'm not going to throw any names out right now. You know who you are, and thank you for the information. But this is a great concern to me. How would you, if you say you're Coast Guard, you come aboard, probably you had a ship out there, helicopters landing, all of this, but how would you know what's inside that oil cargo? Do you have the equipment necessary to scan that ship to see if there are explosives implanted? You know, I'm sure they thought about this, but do they have the equipment necessary to do the job? I mean, you could be a sealed container in the bottom of the oil, somewhere in the, it's a huge area where the oil is stored on these tankers. I don't know, but it's concerning to me seeing what's happening. Maduro's mad as hell about his drug boats and his oil and everything else. And another thing is, I'm not sure, someone out there may know, when the Skipper was confiscated by the Coast Guard, and it was confiscated right off the coast of Venezuela. Where was it headed? So you may have two parties to be concerned about, the buyer and the shipper. You understand what I'm saying? It's like the way they would do pirates. I'm not saying the U.S. is pirating these things. They've been told to stop with their gangs, the cartels, the fentanyl, and until they do, it's a shame, because Venezuela was a very rich country at one time before the cartels took over and it became a communist territory and went to ruins. They had plenty of oil, and they could be right on the top if they had the right government in place, if there's a such thing. You know what I'm saying. But I don't want to draw this out any longer. It's just very concerning about what's going on. I think I may have a picture of that area. Hold on just a moment. Now, this is in Galveston Bay, and a lot of this happens right outside of it, but this just gives you an idea. This is container ships, tanker ships in Galveston Bay on this particular image. And guys, not only is it just tankers, they're putting oil rigs all over this area. I mean, they're saying it's changing the skyline of Galveston because of the amount of, I guess, from drill, baby, drill. But it's always been some out there, but now it's really starting to build up. So it's One of the things happening, guys, is the world is running low on good crude oil. You can only drain so much in the last 100 years, and you're going to start having huge sinkholes like we see, things like that, and probably other things, fault zones being more susceptible to cracking and pressure. Think about it. It's the kind of what keeps the crust. It's like draining the oil out of your engine, in other words. So if you got oil down in some of these big fault zone areas and you drain it out, it just doesn't create a good scenario. They don't talk about things like that. But this is a very, very crowded area. And it's just something to think about, guys. If you're in the Galveston area and they're bringing in that cargo there, and there's people talking about something possibly happening in the Gulf of America within the next few days, it's time to pay attention. And if nothing happens with this ship, then I would definitely pay attention to the next one, because if they know, the Maduro regime knows that the satellites can pick up the movement of the small drug boats, the jeeps that drive to the harbor to deliver the drugs to the drug boats. They can dang sure pick up these big dark fleet oil tankers. So they may have a surprise. It's something that I hope our U.S. military, and we've got some pretty smart people there, that are aware of. But again, how would you search a ship full of oil? I don't know. Maybe somebody in the comments that had possibly worked on some of these ships can give us a little more information than I have. But my main point was the Trojan horse scenario. And that would be devastating to the entire country and the entire Gulf itself. We're watching it, guys. You watch it. It's a heads up. Be safe.